Verity Babbs.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. So this is Pure Talk season 5, which bizarrely I started at the beginning of lockdown, but it didn't have a title at that point, as many of these projects don't, do they?
Yeah.
It was just oh dear, what are we going to do? Let's just do some chats with people. And now it's got a title, it's got an official thing, it's on a website and a YouTube. So quite funny. But yeah, we're in season 5, just coming to the end of season 5, and then planning and thinking about season 6. So season 5 was really just about chatting to creatives and finding out about their journey and what that can help and tell us and help other creatives. So I met you as part of the Clubhouse moment.
The phenomenon. You blinked and you missed it, but it was for a time it felt like being on the frontier.
It was. You were on the edge. We were on the edge. And it was so funny because I remember we being another one of those lockdowns that we didn't know what the hell was going on. And I'd be sat there and I'd be thinking, oh, I must get on at 5 o'clock because Verity and the Rise Art crew will be on and I need to listen to what they've got to say and chip in my 5 penneth. So you were at Rise Art at that point, curating, and you were doing other bits and pieces, weren't you?
Yeah. So at that point, I mean, I had foolish timing when it came to the pandemic, in that I very foolishly decided to graduate in 2019, which only gave me about 6 months to work out what was going on. But I was living at home in the Midlands, and in the sort of Dick Whittington style, moved to London to sort of seek my fortune, and got my job with Rise Art in the February of 2020. And so I was working in the office.
Optimal.
Working in the office for a month and a half before I was on furlough, and then they left the offices as well. So I was just in a cupboard in London, a very expensive cupboard in London for no reason. But yeah, so at that point, Clubhouse seemed to be the new thing, and I think it was really born out of everyone's real desire to see and speak to literally anyone other than the people they were living with.
Yes.
Suddenly we really wanted to engage with strangers, which is not a thing that happens any other time. But it was certainly a moment.
So true, so true. I was like sitting here thinking, who do I know and who I don't know, and how do I just keep connected with people?
There was suddenly such emphasis as well. I think it's probably not great in terms of the whole hustle culture thing, but suddenly there was such emphasis on like, well, now is the time to really develop your online network, and who do you know, and this is the time that you really need to be like making the most of these connections. And it was like telling everyone to be really optimally productive and reaching out to people, while also all of us being slightly worried we might all die at any given moment was very strange.
It was, and that's the funny thing, isn't it? There's some people, I mean, there became this kind of like, you don't want to be lockdown lazy. That thing, you don't want to be seen as lockdown lazy.
And if I had my time again, I would do as little as was humanly possible, I think. I don't know. Similarly with Pure Art, it was during the lockdowns that I started my interview videos with people having a chat, so interviewing comedians about artworks, that has since developed into Art Loves, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So there are some things in the pandemic that I was like, well, I'm glad that happened then, but right now I just really want to have a rest.
My goodness, I'm so glad you said that, because so do I.
Another lockdown that turns out to be a false alarm for like a week and a half. That would be ideal.
Go in.
If I can put in a pitch for that to the government.
Yeah. Rishi, are you listening? We just want,
I'm sure he is.
Maybe a couple of weeks. Honestly, that's all we need. I know. I am so with you. I posted something up on Facebook last week and said, oh my goodness, I'm so exhausted. I need to put down some of these bags. I'm just like, it's January. It's meant to be like, we're meant to be hibernating. What am I doing? You can see I've got massive loads of artwork to pack up behind me. I've got planning for the entire year, grant applications to write. I'm shattered.
I think that's the thing that I'm finding as well, as sort of as someone who is newly entirely freelance, is that there is actually never, the to-do list is never done, but I'm someone who definitely tends towards a going like a roller coaster and sort of needing the, adrenaline hit of a deadline, and then the dopamine hit of doing something well to survive. So it's like Tinkerbell and Peter Pan, where she doesn't have applause, she dies. It's that sort of thing where I'm feel like so on the go that I really do need like a legally enforced break.
Exactly.
otherwise it won't happen, because there is always someone to reach out to or follow up with, or websites to be updated, and it never ends. I didn't think I should have signed up for this.
And then there's that risk of burnout, isn't there? That risk of you go, and then you that ever looming risk of, hang on a minute, and I should have learnt by now. I should have learnt my lesson by now.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've got a bookshelf full of entirely unread self-help books, and it's nice to know that the option's there. If I wanted to read them and improve myself, the option is there. But I've got all of these resources about treating yourself kindly and having breaks. And I say this to everyone I know of make sure you're having breaks and rest, and you're no good to anyone when you're burnt out and this kind of thing. And yet here I am.
I know. Oh my goodness, we are like literally sisters. It's insanity, isn't it? I do think it is part of that culture of working in the arts. Is that you just don't know where the next money or project or whatever is coming from, and that kind of portfolio career.
Yeah, and it's never as clear about what the end is, what the goal is as well. I think that I'm always very jealous of my friends who at 17 they went, you know what, I'm going to be a barrister, and they went to university and did a law degree, and they did the other exams afterwards, and they are now a barrister. Whereas if you go into the arts, I always find a very difficult time explaining what I do to people at parties, because it's like, well, bits and pieces, and what don't I do? Which is just such an irritating answer to give. But I think we've still got that sense of always moving on to the next thing, which is very difficult if fundamentally you work in quite an abstract way. So you always feel like you're chasing the next promotion, even though that's not how this all works. I was speaking to a friend of mine about this, because everyone is exhausted, about the fact that we, in the school system here, you end up on such a habit of, the year 7s become year 8s. And in year 8, you learn a whole different amount of stuff, and you are meant to develop in a certain way. And then you do year 8, and then you do year 9. And like, there's a real sense of progression. And it happens all the way through university. And eventually you go, oh, there aren't any more exams. Like, I'm now not going from whatever year it must be now, I'm not going from year 21 into 22. And yet every time September comes around, I feel slightly panicked and like I need to buy another diary and get some more school shoes.
Exactly. Yeah, quickly run to Clark's.
Yeah, exactly. I feel, and your body really carries on to that. I think it's learning to lean into the humanities art world freelance thing of, no, it's totally fine if actually in 2023, 2024 and 2025 things are basically, I'm doing the same things, because it might turn out that 2026 has loads of growth in it, but I think we're so scheduled to be like, well, what have I achieved this year? It sort of ends up stunting your growth because you're so worried about growing that you never do.
You're absolutely right.
This has definitely become therapy, by the way.
Yeah.
It all started when I was 4.
Yeah, I'll send you my invoice afterwards.
Oh, thank you. Good.
Yeah, no problem. There'll be an invoice and then it'll be okay.
Oh, dear.
But I so hear you, and that's it, isn't it? Like, growth can just be staying the same. It's that thing, like you said, the muscle memory of school, but also we've been also politically, Rishi, hope you're listening again, told about the whole thing about, the country has to have continual economic growth. That's just not sustainable, is it? Not unless we want to kill the planet, which we seem to be on a mission to do right now.
Well, yeah, the whole that terrible ad with that lovely ballerina who, they don't know that their next job is in tech. They just don't know it, and it's just, I mean, it's appalling. I mean, the first vote I ever had was for Brexit. In the Brexit vote, the vote was not for Brexit.
No.
And so far in my voting life, it has never gone the way I voted. So there is just this sense of like, one day it'll go my way.
One day it'll be for me.
One day.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned, isn't there? And I think you're absolutely right in identifying that we've been programmed. We've been programmed, but we have free will. So now we recognize it when we feel the muscle memory and the urge to go to Clark's and get out and stand on that foot measuring machine. We should do something completely counterintuitive and, like, you know, not do it and go and do something completely the opposite. You know, go and sit on a beach and, you know, read a book and just listen to the seagulls.
And I think people are realizing that as well. I mean, more and more of my friends are going, do you know what? I'm actually fed up of working for someone else that drives me crazy and takes up all of my time. And at the end of the day, I've made them really rich and I'm getting by. So more and more people I know are sort of turning to either, you know, entirely going freelance or changing their work so that they sort of do a part-time job and then they're freelancing on the side. Or I think that it's become such a more mainstream viable option for people to work for themselves in at least some capacity, which has just been completely life-changing for me. And I mean, the same month that I went freelance, I got my adult ADHD diagnosis, which completely blew everything open for me as well, in terms of like, no, this is how I should be working. I should be really leaning into the fact that, you know, it's so much better for me. I think that if someone ever wanted me to do a full-time job ever again, they'd have to pay me like a ludicrous amount of money. Like I'm talking like £1 billion per day or something. Like it would be outrageous, because it's just so affirming to be really in charge of the decisions I make, and I can really lean into, you know what, it's just not happening today, but another day I might be really on it and want to work up until the night time, but I've got that, you know, that control has been so good for me.
Yeah. How do you, because I always see ADHD as a bit of a superpower.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
It's interesting. It's something that's really new for me. I mean, it wasn't something that was ever at all on my radar, because like most people, in my file marked ADHD is misbehaving little boys and people who are, you know, really struggling academically because they simply can't sit still, and naughty children. And I wasn't a naughty child, and I didn't struggle at school. And it was only when I was having some therapy a couple of years ago that my therapist said, this might be something you want to look into. And at that point, there was also this increase in women with ADHD making videos on TikTok and Instagram and that sort of thing. So there was much more of a discussion about the fact that, you know, in women, far more likely to rear its head in, you know, really struggling with emotions and your emotional reactions with things, daydreamy, bad at attention span, which people will put down to being lazy rather than an impairment. So I mean, I got my diagnosis last summer, and the roller coaster it's been on that. I mean, I was, you know, weeping at the appointment when they said, you know, this is what it is, and it just sort of it meant I had years of stuff to unwrite in my head of like, actually not lazy and stupid, struggling, or, you know, actually not really needy in relationships, actually completely unable to regulate these emotions, and it's something that I should have been helped with. And, you know, but it was so interesting quite how quickly I went from relief to really, really cross. And a few of my friends have also been diagnosed recently with either ADHD or other neurodivergent conditions, and it's amazing how we're all so cross, and people hate when women are cross and they really hate it. But there's this sense of, you know, this is, you know, this information is out there, that this is how it presents itself in women. And there are, you know, countless times over my lifetime where this should have been picked up. And it's just that real anger that you've had to spend years punishing yourself for something that's entirely out of your control. And I mean, and now I'm sort of out on the other side of it, much more palatable and less angry, and learning how to really, you know, like lean into it. I mean, it was a few weeks after my diagnosis, and I was looking at some essay or some article I was writing, and I just couldn't like focus on it. And I ended up saying aloud, you know, what the is wrong with me, aloud on my own in my office. And it sort of hurt so much to be like, I've been saying this to myself for 20 years, and the answer is nothing at all. But it's really lovely to now be like, the answer is nothing at all. Nothing is wrong with me. This is just the wiring that I've got in the lottery.
Yeah.
and to work with it. And that's been a big part of how I've now structured my sort of freelance life, I guess.
Yeah, it's not surprising that you feel angry. I mean, the potential for gaslighting when you are, your wiring doesn't conform with the norm, with the average. But how many of I don't want to be average. I don't want to be average.
And it's just a case of, everyone has got such a different hand dealt to them, and it's working out the ways in which your hand maybe puts you at a slight disadvantage, but also it's really important to then look at the ways in which your hand sets you at a huge advantage.
Yeah.
It's like, I am white, I am middle class, I went to Oxford, and despite sort of the struggles with the disability of ADHD, there is the hand is so good. I'm like, in general, I've got such a good hand. So, and I think that's just something that everyone's so much more aware of now, is to be aware of your hand and also sort of be aware of other people's hands. I mean, I'm slightly getting out of the habit now, but I always found in freelancing is that if I saw anyone doing the sort of stuff that I wanted to do, so someone's presenting something cool or they're writing for a cool publication, I'd immediately look them up to see how old they were. And if they were older than me, it'd be like, it's fine, they've had a couple more years of working it out. And there was one recently where I looked someone up and I was like, oh, they're doing something cool and I'm not doing it. I looked it up and I found out we were the same age and I felt really terrible. And then I sort of did further digging and it turns out that they're like 60th in line to the throne. And I was like, different hands.
Different
hands.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been a big thing for me as well, as working out sort of that it's completely acceptable for everyone to be doing things at their own pace, because it goes back to that school thing of, I might not get through year 29. I might not graduate year 29 at the same time as other people, but some people will still be at it in 20 years' time. Some people already did it 10 years ago. So, it all depends.
Yeah, I was having this conversation at the weekend and I said, I didn't go back to education really until I was 29. And then I didn't do my master's degree. I know I don't look this old, but I did not do my master's degree until I was 45, when I was ready, when I'd sorted my head out.
And that's the thing, I think, something I say to myself is that if someone were to say, I've been to the future and you do all the things you want to do, your big goals, you do them, but you do them at 50. I'm like, would that matter? And the answer is no, of course not. And yet, as soon as every September comes and I'm like, well, I'm still not done that, have I? Even though that might be part of technically something that would take 10 years to do. And yet I'm still surprised I've not managed it in a week.
Yeah.
So
that's the ADHD, that's the ADHD, isn't it? That is part of that programming. And it's funny because time is quantum. It's a human convention. You went to Oxford, you know this. It's completely devised by human beings, probably at Oxford and Cambridge, to control us. It's a tool to control us. And the sooner you can let that drop and just go, I'm just going to be, and I'll get there when I get there. Life's not a competition. I'm just going to get there when I get there. God, I tell you, Verity, it is so liberating. And all of a sudden you don't look your age and you just are. You're just a human. Going on your personal journey.
And so much of it as well is such a historical hangover, where you think about the idea of our friends who work in full-time careers. They're like, yeah, but I get home and the house is a state and I've not gone to the gym in ages and I've not really got time to cook and whatever it is. It goes, yeah, because the 40-hour working week was designed for when you'd have a husband doing it and you would be doing all the rest. So if ever you feel like you're behind on things, it's because actually you're not meant to be doing it single-handedly. So it's all hangover from sort of Victorian attitudes to what everyone should be doing and keeping people on the clock for as long as possible.
It's just control. All of those things.
Doable,
yeah, they're all control. And as you say, I was talking to my husband the other day and I said, look, if I do this, you're going to have to do that. Okay. Yes, he says yes. I was like, okay, sign here. Just so we understand each other.
It's amazing. I think, like, you know, we're seeing more and more companies move to, you know, trialing the 4-day week and these sorts of things. But then I'm speaking to my brother and sister-in-law just had their first child, and a couple of other of our friends have had their first children. It's just amazing speaking to the dads who were like, yeah, I got 2 weeks off because they assume that my wife, who actually earns way more than me, is going to be doing everything. And it's stuff like that where you go, that's not even a generation ago, that's 5 generations ago of these attitudes, that it's just inescapable unless you sort of opt yourself out.
Yeah, or stand your ground. You have to stand your ground, don't you? I mean, paternity leave is becoming more of a thing, but you know, absolutely, you know, my husband and I both, you know, have careers, and you know, how are we meant to, you know, how are you meant to juggle all of that if you don't do it as a partnership?
You
have to do it as a partnership.
And then there becomes such an emphasis then on romantic partnerships as something that is the be all and end all of your life, because it's like, well, you know, you need to find someone so that you can be together, because, you know, eventually it's, you know, who will look after when you're old. But it's like, you know, if you want to, you know, no one's going to get on with the property ladder being the way it is, you've got to team up. So there's so much emphasis on this idea that in order to keep up with the, you know, the 40-hour work week system and to survive, you've then also got this added pressure of having to find a significant other, which is terrible for, you know, huge amounts of people who that's of no interest to them. And yet broken country, just another day, just another day in
just
Normal
another
Island.
day. Just another day on this island. Rishi, I really hope you're listening. Oh, I get so some people say to me, you should go to, I'm like, no way do I want to be in with that. No, thank you.
Seeing them at university, there's a strange thing in Oxford. I always found the whole thing very odd. I mean, in a very small year group in the art history department, and I think I was the only person who was state educated there, so it was all very odd and all felt very sort of just very foreign to me. And the problem is that I've seen the rishis of 20 years time. I've met them and they're dreadful.
Oh God.
and it's like, yeah, it's crazy, because I mean, things like the debate club of the Oxford Union, everyone takes it so seriously, and you see that people are sort of having to send out public letters announcing their resignation from being, you know, the secretary of the union, and there's been some scandal, and you go, you're 20 years old. But it's so serious because this is their practice go at being an MP. And it's just the worst thing in the whole world.
And they're still writing letters at 20 saying they've done something wrong, which really does worry me.
And at the time, I properly was like, I can't believe the secretary has said that to the, you know, has said that to the chair of this debate or whatever. And now I go, you're a child, and you're having to state your, you know, give your public stance on this big apology. And it goes, you should be riding your bike. Like, also, you got essays to write, but you should mostly be in a pub, surely. And yet, you know,
go and get a life. So you did Oxford, and then you graduated in 2019. You got
just about
skin of your teeth like the rest of us. And my daughter graduated in 2019 as well. So I feel you. You know, she literally left uni and ended up being locked down in Manchester, which wasn't a great moment. Like leaving home kind of like hardwired fast, because that wasn't what was expected because of being locked down outside of our home. She was very cross about that as well. Another cross woman. And then you went to Rise, but were you always intending or wanting to kind of be independent and work for yourself?
Yeah, I suppose so. My parents are both actors, and they've always been freelance. And that's just the way that my household always worked, is that actually I was so lucky that basically at any given time it was 99% likely the chance that one of my parents was at home, at least one of them, which was fabulous for me. And then I got to be about a teenager, and sort of in a relatively rebellious stance, I was like, never want to be freelance. All I want is to go to a job, and I know when I go in and I know when I go out, and I know exactly how much money I get paid. And I tried that for a bit, and it just isn't me. It just doesn't fit with whether it's nature or nurture. Fundamentally, I think freelance lifestyle was always going to be what I ended up doing, and what that ended up being in, I suppose, the chopped and changed. I mean, at university, I was spending, I was doing my degree, but I was spending a lot of time mostly doing stand-up and improv, and working with the Oxford Imps, who were fantastic, and doing some stuff with the Oxford Review. So whenever my degree was going badly, I'd say, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be a comedian. And then when comedy was going bad, it was like, well, don't worry, I'm going to be an art historian, so it's fine. So it's
backup plans all over the place.
Exactly. It just depends on what day you catch me. The only job less secure than being a comedian and being an art historian. So yeah, I mean, graduated, applied for lots of jobs, got my job at Rise Art, who've been very good to me over the years, and tried that for a bit. But even when I was working full-time for them, I was still trying to write for online publications and trying to engage in art world stuff outside of that. And I don't think there was a plan at that point, but when lockdown hit and I started doing the interviews, and I had some really brilliant people do it. I mean, Rosie Jones did it, Chris Turner did it, we had Jenny Eclair do it later on. It sort of made me realise that, having worked in the art world and seeing quite how po-faced it often is, and how serious and how sort of overly academic and exclusionary it is, I had no interest in being part of that in a meaningful way. So by the time I was doing the videos, it became obvious to me that part of my career was always going to be trying to find a way to incorporate comedy into this, or speak about art in an approachable way. I'd always been really interested in being a presenter, so the writing was always sort of hopefully a way to look like I know enough stuff about art to be allowed to talk about it. But yeah, so I think there was always a sense of it. I wouldn't be someone who had a job title in a company. This would all be material for later on,
Yeah, gathering, because the best comedy comes from, reflection on real life, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, and I mean, I've seen acts who went straight from university to who are brilliant comics, fabulous comics, who went straight from university into being a full-time professional comic, but then all they've got to talk about is their time at university or maybe their love life, but they've not actually done much else. So that's why I'm always very pleased that I've not done very well in comedy, is because I'm going to have all this material later on. No, they're brilliant, but yeah, it's all gathering it up. And similarly with the stand-up, when things opened up again, I was like, well, great, I'm going to go back to gigging, I'm going to be a gigging comedian. And I did a gig and I went, wow, it turns out I actually hate this. I hate driving to the middle of nowhere to perform stand-up for no money to 3 old men in a pub who hate it. Like, why? And you've got to do that for years until anyone offers you to do anything good. And I just realized I had no interest in that. And that was also freeing, because I think I'd had this idea that, there is one way to be a stand-up, and you do, you do the going on road trips and it being terrible, and then you're allowed to bring a show to Edinburgh, and then you're allowed to be on television. And there was this idea that that's how one does it. And actually it was such a relief to get back from this gig and go, I hated that. That was awful. That and not even a gig that went badly. It wasn't like this was like no one laughed and this is like awful. It was, fine, but why would I commit my life to doing that? Which then led me to be like, but I do love performing, so maybe I'll try to start something where I'm leading it. And that's sort of where the idea for Art Laughs, as it kind of now is brewing, came from.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about Art Laughs then, because you did Edinburgh Fringe, didn't you, last year?
Yeah.
And was that part of the whole Art Laughs kind of plan?
It was, yeah. So back in 2021 at London Art Bar, which is a fantastic venue in Holborn, we're looking for events. So I thought I'd pitch Art Laughs as a live event, having done the interviews at that point for maybe a year or so. And the live event was basically myself as MC and 3 comedians doing a 10-minute set about art, loosely about art. It often wasn't at all. And then we'd all sit down together and we'd have a panel discussion. And behind us on a screen, I'd have projected works of art, the type of contemporary art that makes people cross, and you know, Hearst's shark, NFTs,
oh God, don't.
yeah, Tracy Emin's bed, these sorts of things that get people cross. And we talk about them and decide whether they were any good, and we just have a discussion. I think that's the same thing with the interviews. It was just to get the, you know, no one had to know anything. I don't want to have to know anything about art, really. No one had to revise. We were just talking about art in a way that excited us, and we were talking about ideas, and no one had to know when Kandinsky was born or whatever it was. Like, it was just, you know, the comedians picked an artwork that they liked, or that was in, sometimes it was prints in their parents' homes or album covers that meant something to them, and just talking about art, how I think it should be able to be spoken to by everyone. I think that working in the art world for the time that I already had been at that point, I just realized that there's this sense that unless you've got a master's degree, you shouldn't really have a public opinion about anything, because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. But which is so sad, because it's like, it would be like saying that about music. I'd speak to friends who were really scared about the idea of art, and they'd say, you know, oh well, I don't know anything about art, and I don't really understand art. But if I were to ask them, you know, why did they pick one sofa over another, they could tell me for half an hour about the texture and the color and the way it matches with something else in the room. It's like, yeah, so you do understand what you like.
Yeah.
And going to exhibition openings with people, and with friends, and I'd say, oh, you know, which one do you like? And they felt like they weren't really allowed to say. And when they say, well, I kind of like that one, and I'd say, why do you like it? And they'd go, oh, well, it's kind of stupid, but I just really, I love the color of it. And I go, yeah, that's the right answer. You know, that is the right answer. You know, I love it because it's massive, or I love it because it's funny, or I love it because I think the woman in that painting's really beautiful. That's the right answer. But they're worried that because they can't say, you know, oh, well, the references to vorticism really impacted, you know, like that's that nonsense.
Yeah, and the symbolic colours that they've used, and all of that nonsense.
It's for you.
Yeah.
In the same way that music is for you, you know, and that you're allowed to like it. So that's why I always wanted Art Laughs to be something sort of fun and inviting. So when I went up to Edinburgh, I'd gone through a sort of period of trying to work out what stayed and what went from my working life, because, you know, at that point I hadn't done a video in a while, and I was feeling quite guilty about it. But I decided to say, you know, well, if it's not serving me at the moment, I can put the pause on that. That's fine. And writing, I'm really enjoying, so I'm doing more of that, so that's fine. And then with the show, I was like, well, I'm not quite sure where it fits. So I thought I'd take it up to Edinburgh. I did a week on the Free Fringe. And as far as I was concerned, that might have been the end of it. It was really going to see, this might be the final farewell, or it might teach me something about it. And I went, and we had a fantastic time, and we had amazing acts. As part of the bill, Leo Reich did it, Pierre Novelli did it, we had Emily Bampton, Bella Hull, all these amazing names. And we had a fantastic time, and it made me realise that actually the audiences who did manage to get there, I was in a venue that was sort of not even in Edinburgh anymore, and I couldn't afford to advertise it at all. And
I had the Edinburgh fringe.
Exactly, Leith Fringe, and I sort of couldn't afford to be in the big book, and so I was flyering people outside of the Royal Academy in Scotland, in the big square. And the first day I sort of strolled up to a group who'd come out of the gallery with my little flyer, and to say, you know, oh, if you liked what you saw in there, you'll like this. And this Scottish guy looked at me very sternly and said, I effing hated what I saw in there. So he didn't.
Okay, well, if you hated that, you'll love this.
He didn't come in the end. And we cobbled it together, and you know, and it was brilliant. It made me realise, like, no, the acts do enjoy this, and the people who come and watch it, they're it's like a pantomime in there. They're shouting out to be like, well, I don't like Damien Hirst because of this, and it goes back and forth, and it's this real buzz about it. So I was like, well, no, I want to give this a good go, and have since been focusing on how to kind of get this going. And so we've got a date for doing the show in the Royal Museum's Greenwich, and we're doing a date in the National Gallery, and trying to get it into these spaces where more people can see it, because it's a show that I think should be seen by more people, so that they can engage with art in a way that maybe they felt like was off bounds for them. So really looking forward to where it's going, and just trying to build that momentum up.
Yeah, because what you're referring to really is that whole, again, programming that started with Aristotle, who said, basically what we choose to look at and what we choose to have to appreciate. It shows our taste and shows our position in society, and that's it, isn't it? It's kind of come right through to where we're terrified of speaking our truth because we're terrified about what it might say we're middle class, or you know, whatever, and it's just so silly. And as you say, it's just such fun. I love having a good old heated debate about Damien Hirst's shark or his barbecue with his flies and what have you. I just love it, and I love people just coming and going, I love the colour.
Yeah,
that's cool. But I also like fun.
Yeah,
and having a laugh.
And so much art is funny, and it's meant to be funny, and yet we feel. I mean, I always say this to people: next time you go to a museum or gallery, and you see people going about, probably not people with children because they're probably dashing about, but look and see how many people are smiling. It's probably one. and because, you know, oftentimes the first interactions we'll have with cultural space as a child is the opposite of what you want in the world. You're not allowed to run about, you're not allowed to touch anything, you're not really meant to make any noise, and you're meant to stand still and stare at something for minutes at a time when all you want to do is go to the gift shop and be out of there. And that carries through with us in adulthood, where I was saying to when my partner and I first started seeing each other, I said, do you want to come with me to this exhibition opening? And he looked really worried and was like, well, what do I wear? And like, how formal is it? And, you know, gallery openings now,
it's not.
You come in, you know, jeans and a t-shirt and everyone's drinking beer and it's very relaxed. But the sense from childhood that these spaces are super formal and frightening and dull is so sad, because actually the history of art is hilarious, and almost all of contemporary art is nonsense, and you should be able to say, you know, that's what you think, without worrying
free
that it's the wrong answer.
Sorry, the cat decided to
don't worry.
Come and try and destroy the desk while we're chatting. I same with my husband, and he's like, I'm not arty. Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? But you like art, and if I say to you, I'm going to buy this, and you go, oh, I don't like it, or so you have an opinion. So, you know, come along. And I've had lots of friends, you know, over the years who have said the phrase, I'm not arty. And you're like, now most of them will say, when are you going to that art exhibition? Can you get me a ticket? Can I come with you? And
things like the Kasama Infinity Rooms, where actually I've got my own criticisms about that exhibition, but people wanted to go, and whether or not that was because they wanted to take a selfie is neither here nor there. They wanted to go to an art exhibition in a major gallery which they maybe have never been into before, because there was something interactive and something really exciting about it, which sort of just goes to show that actually art shouldn't just be paintings hung up on a wall in an empty space where no one's meant to say anything. People want to engage with art, but the way that it's presented to them is like being told off at school. It's like a punishment. I mean, for me, I'm in and out of a gallery in 10 minutes. I mean, I went to Frieze last year and I hit my record for how long I'd stayed in there, and I was there for a whole half an hour before leaving. And there is, you know, if you've been to Frieze, there's tens of thousands of artworks in there, and that's a wiring thing of I just can't hold my attention for that long. But I've lent into it, and it's like, well, that's great, because it means I can have an opinion on something really quickly and talk to someone about it. So it's all, I used to say it was sort of charlatanism, but actually I think it's fine. But and yeah, I mean,
I agree. Just do you. I took a group of people out to the first Paris Plus last year, and honestly, normally I'm like you. I'm like, look around, get what I'm done, I'm out. And we were there for virtually the whole day because it was so immersive, and I loved it. And also there's a lot of female art, a lot of craft-based performance, immersive textiles. It was just so good. And I literally would go and just sit down with a stand owner and go, what made you bring this? This is amazing. It's knitting. You know, how'd you get that past?
And that's the significance of having people who work in the art world who actually want to talk about it. I mean, you go to fairs now, and some of them won't make, you know, they won't make any eye contact with you unless you've got an enormous sort of cartoon check with you to suggest you're going to buy something. And yes, it's no wonder that everyone thinks that the art world is sort of snooty and inaccessible. Whereas actually, you know, I see job adverts all the time for, you know, front of house at really, you know, quite big contemporary art galleries, and they're paying them nothing, and yet expect them to have a PhD. And it's like, no, having a PhD in art history does not make you necessarily good at being friendly.
Yeah,
And
you
that's
need to
what
be
people
friendly.
need. They need people to, you know, invigilators to be there who you feel like you genuinely could ask them a stupid question, and that they would reply to you, and that you know, these sorts of things. I think that's always been more important to me in my jobs, whatever I'm calling it, is to essentially just be really approachable. And I can talk to you about art. I might not be able to give you all the details, but fundamentally want to be someone who is thought of as being encouraging and welcoming and approachable. And to really give, you know, you can put on amazing exhibitions. You could be a curator who puts on a fantastic show. And then you sort of scratching your head as to go, well, why was it all the same people who came?
Yeah.
It's because actually, you know, you've done something very, very clever and well done, because that takes a lot of work and it's been very, very clever. But how did you make anyone else feel like they were welcome there? I mean, lots of galleries and museums say, no, we are accessible because the tickets are free. You can just walk in. Yeah, but why would anyone walk into somewhere that they didn't feel like they would be like welcomed, you know? And
yeah, you've got to have an in, haven't you? You've got to give them a way of getting into it. I know that, that my pet hate of going to these art fairs and such like is when you're walking around and everyone on the stand is just looking at their phone. And they're all stood down there, you know, three of them in a little huddle, just looking at their phone, or they're sat in the corner drinking and eating and talking to each other. I'm like, why are you here? Why are you here? This must be costing your gallery a fortune.
But it's costing a gallery a fortune, but to be seen being there makes it all worth it. It's all these things, you know, they don't actually have to speak to anyone, because actually to be seen as not only having a booth at whichever fair it is, but to be so busy you're on your phone is like it's personal branding through a star, because, you know, suddenly not only is this person wealthy enough and important enough to be here, but they're so wealthy and important that they can't even talk to you.
They can't even be bothered to talk to you,
which is just you know, and we don't have it in the music industry and in the theatre. And I mean, I'm very blessed. I moved down to Southampton last year, and it's fantastic, the scene in Southampton, because there's a real emphasis on how do we get art to the people who live here, rather than having galleries that essentially are visited by people who already like art. So there's lots of, you know, the John Hansard Gallery did a fantastic exhibition recently in the shopping centre, where you could go and have your photo taken in a setup done by the fantastic artist Grace Lau. And A Space Arts do lots of exhibitions in shop windows that you can just walk past anytime. There's lots of sculpture and public things happening, and I think that's fantastic. And I found it so hard to feel part of a community like that in London, because it's so enormous. And I think that's just because I grew up somewhere so rural that I just found London a bit boggling. But yeah, there's a real, you know, smaller towns and cities are really excelling in this, and yet it's just not translated into these London's corporate galleries and these big names. We're getting there, but, you know, some of the best exhibitions I've ever seen have been not in London, and in, you know, exhibitions in the Midlands, and you know, galleries that, you know, they might only have 10 people come through the door every day, but those 10 people properly leave feeling like, oh, I learned so much, or that really struck me. But we've got such a hierarchy in this idea that, you know, if you want to make it, you've got to be in London, and if you're a proper artist, you exhibit all the time in London, and whatever it is, it's all
yeah,
it'll change, but it's hardwired into the system. I think
it's a slow thing. She's back, the cat. Just warning everyone, the cat's back. I agree. I mean, I'm very, very lucky that I live on the south coast, near Hastings, which is, you know, an incredible place to live. We have music, we have performance, we have highly interactive, we have some amazing look at that tail. We have some amazing public space
performance art.
Yeah, look at
demonstrated.
That. Look at that. She's going to go down there on the seafront and be performing shortly. Some amazing performance art, and that's the thing. And I feel sad because it isn't still translated into London. And, you know, in London you don't get that. and we are massively privileged. I think she might sit on the keyboard in a minute, just in case it goes completely blank. Everybody, you'll know what happened. So just to wrap up, because it's been absolutely fascinating, because the elephant in the room is money. You know, it's great. And, you know, we have this amazing scene where I live down in Hastings and where you live. And, you know, you're talking about doing the interactive stuff with the community and all of that, and highly accessible events and making it fun and everything. But how does that get paid for? Because especially now, especially at the moment, how do you get paid?
Yeah, I think with these galleries, they're having to work so hard to get a crumb from big funding that it pushes their time budget so far. So much of it is applying for grants and crossing your fingers and courting different people to try to get that money. That I'm very pleased that that's not something that I am involved in. I think I'm still at a very early point in my career, which I have to keep on telling myself to put less pressure on myself. And that's why, you know, this is the time where this is the legwork. You know, this isn't the time for like big breaks. This is when I'm putting the legwork in. This is when I'm doing the jobs I don't really want to take, but I have to for the money, and working out that balance of things. I mean, I'm loving at the moment doing an hour show on Voice FM, which is in Southampton, doing their arts and culture show. And I've had such an amazing time learning. And it's a volunteer station, so it's not something I'm being paid to do. And it brings me so much joy that I'm having to then budget for being allowed to do unpaid work by taking on paid work that maybe I'm not interested in really, or that's difficult or annoying or whatever it might be. So, and I think that's just the way for like any freelancer for whom part of their dream is to be doing public facing work or entertainment work, is that you're going to spend a lot of time having to work in a cafe and do shifts there in order to pay for the fact that you've spent a bit of time doing a volunteer play, or you've not really earned very much doing something that took way too long, but the exposure will be good. And it's terrible that anyone should have to do anything for exposure. I sort of hate that. And there are definitely things that when I first left university that I was doing for free that I now view as like a complete abuse of power, that someone sort of got me to do what I would now consider thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds worth of work for free for exposure. But when I was 21, it was like, this is amazing, that stuff's going to be out there. And so you've got to find that balance. But yeah, I think that it all kind of comes back down to this idea that we should sort of free ourselves from this idea that every day needs to be a breakthrough, that actually a lot of, just to live, sadly, in the sort of broken country we live in, like a lot of stuff is going to be dull and difficult and annoying, and that'll pay your rent. And yeah, and then the fun stuff might come later, but there's a lot of boring, awful stuff that has to happen first, which I'm having to remind myself of, because I'm very impatient about having to do anything I don't like for even 10 minutes.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no such thing as overnight success. And the most successful people will say to you, yeah, but I started on this journey 20 years ago, and I worked in the cafe. I gathered the trolleys from the car park. I did that job. I remember 20 years ago, I was volunteering at a local community centre doing art projects with kids. Just to start getting my learning on how that worked, and how to do community stuff, and how, what the risks were, and, how to manage that. And we all had to do it. We all had to cut our teeth doing that, and doing stuff, as you say, that we didn't want to do. And the problem is that people looking only see you when you're successful, don't they? So it's the wrong criteria to be judging yourself against.
Yeah. And we say this to ourselves over and over and over again, and yet when I see anyone do anything at all exciting on Instagram, I'm like, well, I might as well give up now, as if there's only one little bit of success that only one person can. In school, if you had sort of you can only talk if you're holding the beanbag, and there's only one beanbag. It's like this sort of the beanbag of success can only be held by one person at any given time. And you go, damn, how will I get the beanbag? That actually there's loads of beanbags of different shapes and sizes, and in different
Some
cities.
of them are heated.
Yeah, well, exactly, and some of them are freezing cold, but got a better pattern or whatever. And
Exactly.
that, there are loads of bean bags, and it will all be fine. I say it'll all be fine to myself, probably like a worrying amount, but it will. I fully believe it will all be fine.
It will all be fine. It absolutely will. And that's the absolute manifestation technique, is to just, you go, it'll be fine, and then get on with your life.
Yeah.
Just get on with it.
There's some medieval nun, and I can't remember who it is. I think she was called Judith, who said, all manner of things shall be well. And that's the thing that my grandmother often says to me, all manner of things shall be well. And I think the nun was someone who hit her head against the wall quite a lot and grew a horn. And I don't think that's the sort of person you should be taking advice from. Like, I think it's really nice to be like, all manner of things shall be well, but I think she also did grow a horn.
Look, it may have been useful because she may have been in the era of the witches, so she may have needed a horn. Indeed. At that point. All things will be well, and everything that's meant to be will be. Yeah. There's many of those sayings, aren't there? Indeed. Treat everyone else how you would like to be treated. It was my mum's favourite. And I do live my life by that. It's like, be kind. If you can't be anything else, be kind. And just be a nice human being and considerate. Just be considerate.
And that's so helpful for freelance stuff as well, is because if at the end of the day someone goes, oh, well, I can't do that, but who is nice and I would give this job to, or I'd recommend, or whatever it is, it's like, that's just so much more important than being overqualified in the job, is to just be like, I know lots of nice people who sometimes I recommend for things, and sometimes they recommend me for things, and you never know who knows who and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Never make it up. Another one. Never make a needless enemy.
Yeah, okay.
That's another one.
I like that, because I don't believe in the don't make any enemies thing. No, I like this. Like, you can make enemies. You can make it as many enemies as you want, but don't make it needless. Don't make a needless enemy. I've got a few, but don't make a needless one. Yes. Don't go out of your way to make an enemy. That's really, really silly. But no, that's brilliant. And I just really have a good feeling about the way things are going, and for you, and you're just such a joyful, exuberant personality who's got so much to say, and he's also very ethical and level-headed and balanced, and I think we need more Verities. That's so kind of you to say.
We need more. I love the fact that every time you move, a Damien Hirst shark just winks at me.
Yes, I often have to say to people, too nipply. I did a thing for the National Gallery, and I was like, should I take that down? And they were like, oh, don't worry, we've got way worse, like, on the wall, so that's fine. So you basically either got the option of a shark or nipple, but it's up to you.
And you're swaying, so I get a bit of both. And
yes, that's the problem. I'm a swayer, so I have to apologise to anyone who's been made to feel seasick during this interview.
She lives by the sea, and she likes to.
I got my sea legs.
What about a shanty? We could finish with a shanty.
We will not be finishing with a shanty. I can promise you.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Well, that's been absolutely brilliant, and I think really reassuring for a lot of people that we're all normal. We all have the same hang-ups. We've all been through this programming. Doesn't matter where you come from. We've all seen a bit of it. Whatever side of the grass we happen to be on. But if you just carry on, just keep going, stay calm and carry on, and you will get there in the end. You will. You just have to be resilient, and
all manner of things shall be well.
All manner of things shall be well. Just polish your horn.
Polish your horn.
Horn.
New mantra every morning: polish your horn.
Polish
all manner
your
of
horn.
Things shall be well. Polish your horn. It's going to turn out now. I'm going to look this up afterwards. It's going to turn out that this saint didn't have a horn, and I've just completely made that up. But polish your horn, I think, is a good
look. If she didn't,
motto for life.
We've given her one.
Yes.
And on that note, I think that is a very good place to end.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome.